I bet you didn't know about the Sauter children disappearance. This video suggestion came from IcyCun. They sent me a tip and then told me what they wanted me to do a TikTok on. I'll explain how you can do that at the end of this TikTok. December 24th, 1945. A fire destroyed the home of the Sauter family. George and Jenny Sauter were inside, along with 9 out of their 10 children. Jenny, George, and 4 of the children were able to escape. The other 5 just seemed to disappear. At first, investigators told them, oh, their bodies just burnt up. But everything else in the house was still noticeable. Bodies certainly wouldn't be totally disintegrated from a house fire. But no bodies were ever recovered from the scene. Investigators tried to say, oh, it was an electrical fire. But when that was looked into, that also wasn't the case. Their phone lines had also been cut. When they tried to escape in their truck, it had also been tampered with. A ladder, which was originally leaning against the home, was found 75 feet away in an embankment. A man was seen stealing from the property when the fire started. He was questioned and admitted to being a thief, but they had nothing connecting him to the fire. The Sauter family truly believed that their children were still alive. There is also speculation that the Sicilian mafia had something to do with this, because of George's very outspoken opinion and criticism of the fascist government back in his home of Italy. Some people claim they saw these children at a rest stop the next day. Another woman said as she was standing there watching the house fire, she looked over and the children were peering out of the window of a car. There have been many assumptions made, but still to this day, no one knows what happened to those 5 children. If they were still alive, if they were kidnapped, if there was some sort of foul play by the family, no one knows what truly happened. And we'll never know without knowing where those 5 children are. You have a specific story or subject you want me to do a TikTok on? You can go to my page and send me a tip. If the button isn't available, you can also use my Venmo and Cash App. Just make sure you include your username in the message. I'll follow you back and send you a message. Then you can tell me what you would like for me to do a TikTok on. I bet you didn't know the tragic story of Latanya Carwell. She was a young and brilliant 16-year-old. She was an honor student with dreams to become a doctor, but those opportunities were taken from her, from the people she should have been able to trust the most. April 17th, 2017. Latanya celebrated her 16th birthday at her home. All of her friends and family attended, enjoyed her 16th birthday like any young woman should. But after going to bed, her stepfather, Leon, woke her up in the middle of the night. He said he needed to borrow her phone. Leon told her that he had a friend whose car broke down and he needed his help. And since he wasn't able to read the directions on her phone, she needed to go with him to help him as well. When they weren't home the next day, her mother, Tanya, called the police and even went on Facebook Live begging to have her daughter back. But after 2 weeks, there was no sign of Leon or Latanya. Late April of 2017, they found Leon's car. And soon after, sightings of Leon came forward. Leon was spotted in Atlanta, but there was no sign of Latanya. It also came forward in the media that Leon had quite a hefty record. He had assault charges, cruelty to children charges, and had served a prison sentence before. Tanya, Latanya's mother, actually married Leon while he was still in prison, then moved him directly into her home with her 2 daughters. Someone called saying they were seeing Leon at a U-Haul depot in Atlanta. But as soon as they arrived, they realized Leon wasn't alone. Tanya was with him. They were both immediately arrested. Turns out the phone call that Tanya made to police originally, she sent them on a chase in the complete opposite direction. Leon and Tanya planned this together. Almost a year after Latanya's disappearance, they found her remains. Both her stepfather Leon and mother Tanya were found guilty of murder. The 2 people who were supposed to love and care for Latanya. It even came out in court that they had tried to take a hit out on their daughter 3 different times. And when they were all unsuccessful, Leon decided he was going to do it himself. Leon is up for the death penalty, and Tanya is in prison for life. There is still no known motive for this horrific murder. All we know is that a brilliant young woman's life was cut tragically short. I bet you didn't know about James Saltmarshall. and how he was wrongly accused for a horrific crime that he did not even do. James had full custody of his daughter, Janiah. She was 8 months old. He recently gained full custody after it came out that Janiah's mother was abusing her. He was doing his best as a single father. He was staying at the Alpine Motel in Inkster, Michigan. He had forgotten Janiah's pack and play at his cousin's house, and she had been particularly fussy that night. So he did his best to soothe her, and in his exhaustion, they both fell asleep on the hotel bed. When he woke up, Janiah was not breathing. James immediately called 911, and Janiah was rushed to the hospital. Now, this is what doctors claim were the injuries found on young Janiah. They said that Janiah had tears in her rectum. They said she had skull fractures and brain swelling. She had bruised lungs and anal tears, with other studies pending. Janiah was still alive at this time, but James was immediately arrested because they said he assaulted his daughter and she had suffered from shaken baby syndrome. The whole time, James is beside himself. He's saying, no, I might have just held her too tight when we were sleeping. I just woke up and she wasn't breathing. Yet they kept telling him that he abused his daughter. He was charged with first-degree murder, child abuse, and sexual assault on a minor. At his hearing is when he heard of his daughter's passing. This is the face of a father learning for the first time that his daughter is no longer alive. It was during Janiah's autopsy that the truth came out. She had none of the injuries the hospital claimed that she did. Despite this, he was forbidden to go to his daughter's own funeral. She had a small anal fissure from constipation, and this so-called skull fracture was an itty-bitty tiny cut. The autopsy report said that Janiah's death was from accidental smothering, not from any of the horrific things that the hospital accused James of. Just look at these pictures and tell me that man isn't absolutely devastated that his daughter is gone. And he didn't even get the chance for a final goodbye. James is innocent, and he was doing his best as a single father. He was wrongly accused, and it is absolutely heartbreaking. I bet you didn't know about the Roman candle. And no, I'm not talking about the firework. It was a form of execution used by Emperor Nero. It was used mostly against religious minorities, pretty much the early on Christians. Nero would have these victims tied to a stake in the imperial garden. Their lower half would then be covered in oil, pitch, or other flammable substances. Then starting at the feet, they would light them up. It would be slow and it would be excruciating. As they scream in terror, they could smell their own flesh cooking. And pretty much to add insult to injury, he used these victims as literal candles. That's how he would light his get-togethers and parties. And it's even rumored that the firework known as the Roman candle gets its name from this gnarly execution. I bet you didn't know one of the worst execution methods. It was a slow and agonizing punishment. I'm talking about being boiled alive. They would start by taking a large vat of, let's say, water, oil, wax, sometimes even wine and molten lead were used. And they would start by gradually lowering the victim slower and slower into this large vat. It would start at their feet and send electrifying pain up their body. If the shock and pain did not render them unconscious, the person would experience excruciating pain on their lower limbs. The outer layers of their skin would be excruciatingly burned, dissolving right off the body. Then comes the muscle. It starts to boil and cook and slough off the bone. It would get to the point where there would be meat and fatty tissue just floating around in this substance. You would think an execution method like this would only be reserved for the most horrific murderers. But no, in the Middle Ages, the people that received this were usually just petty thieves. But probably the craziest part, this form of execution was carried out as recently as 2002.